Meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 144 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts of the House of Commons.
Hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including but especially the interpreters. A kind reminder to all those in person and online that for the safety of our interpreters, that it is very important that your microphone is muted when you are not speaking. Merci à tous pour votre coopération.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Comments should be addressed to the chair.
Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3G, the committee is resuming consideration of Report 6, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, of the 2024 reports 5 to 7 of the Auditor General of Canada.
Welcome our witness who's joining us remotely, Navdeep Bains. And I understand you have an opening remark, which is, of course, welcome, and you're right, and you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello.
My name is Navdeep Bains, and from November of 2015 to January 12th of 2021, I served as Canada's Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry. Having once appeared at the Standing Committee on Industry, I'm here to answer any questions regarding Sustainable Development Technology Canada and my role when I was Minister. Again, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization established by an Act of Parliament, and as Minister, my only role, as outlined by the Act, was to make appointments to the Sustainable Development Technology Canada Board. The appointments that I made when I was Minister were recommended to me through a fair, open, and transparent process brought forward in 2016 to allow more opportunities for all Canadians to serve their country. Through that process, all positions are posted publicly on the GIC appointments website. Applications are simple and made online, and postings are posted until an appointment is made. The goal was to bring a consistent process to appointments. After receiving applications for an appointment, a selection panel was led by the Privy Council Office with supports from across government. These panels conducted interviews with the candidates and presented ministers with short lists of candidates. Positions were kept open until a successful candidate was recommended. Accordingly, it would also not be uncommon for multiple groups of candidates to be recommended. I recommended over 100 applicants in this open, transparent, merit-based process from when I was first appointed minister in November 2015 until I left cabinet on January the 12th, 2021. With respect to the relationship between myself and Sustainable Development Technology Canada, as I have previously testified, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization. My role as Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry was to recommend 7 of the 15 board members, including the chair. While funding for Sustainable Development Technology Canada flowed through the department, we were not responsible for the management and governance of the staff or board. I believe in the clean tech sector and the benefits it has brought to Canada. I am proud of the incredible people and companies that have made this sector in Canada a global leader. Once again, I am here to answer your questions. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We'll begin now our first round. It's 4 members who each have 6 minutes each. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, former Liberal Minister Baines. Former Liberal Minister Baines, as a Minister of the Crown, you're responsible to Parliament for all parliamentary appropriations under your department, are you not, in addition to appointments?
When all ministers set budgets, they need to be approved by Parliament. That is correct.
Right, you're accountable for that. So you're accountable for every dollar that's spent that that was allocated. I'm going to ask you, first of all, about your appointment of the chair, Annette Verschuren, who at this committee said 3 times that she didn't apply, that you phoned her twice to ask her to serve. And then,
point of order, Mr. Chair,
she applied after that.
Sorry,
not
Mr.
a point of debate, Mr.
Hold on. I do have a point of order. I do have to hear.
Okay, we'll start all over again then.
The point of order. Yes, Mr. Duray.
the particular person he's talking
That's
about has
debate.
corrected the record. Has corrected the record in writing. Thank you so much.
No, she hasn't.
Well,
no, she hasn't.
okay.
No, she hasn't. If you will listen,
Okay,
you will get the
gentlemen,
answer. So I'll
stop.
start all
This is
over
clearly a point of debate.
again. No, it isn't.
I'll just remind the government members that I don't
You're a government member.
I don't like needless point of orders on either side. So my point, though, is not to highlight that it's a government member issue. It's not. It happens occasionally on both sides when debate gets heated. But you always have the immediately right of reply after Mr. Perkins. It is you, in fact, Mr. Drouin. And I hope that if you extend, in your side, courtesy on the official opposition, they will do the same. And if they do not do so, I will censure them as well. I am going to back up the clock for Mr. Perkins. You can restart your question, Mr. Perkins, not the time, just your question. So I'm backing up the clock, not from the top, but you can start your question from the top.
He interrupted me before I even got my question.
Mr. Perkins, I'm backing
from
up the clock. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Baines, you phoned, according to Annette Verschuren, you phoned her twice to ask her to serve. Is that correct? Because that's what she said at the committee.
As I have stated in my previous
I don't want a
testimony
dissertation on the
ParlVu,
appointment process. It's a simple yes or no. You phoned her twice, yes or no?
As I stated in my previous testimony at industry committee, I reached out to a number of people during my tenure as a minister and asked them to participate in this open,
You called her
transparent,
twice.
merit-based.
Order, Mr.
Mr.
Chair?
Perkins, I have a point of order. I've stopped the clock. Yes, please. Yes,
Thank
please.
you very much. I believe that Ms. Verschuren, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, did
Again, this is
correct her testimony.
okay. I just ruled on this. This is not a point of order.
We will
Stop.
start
It
from
does
the
not
top.
make sense.
Okay,
It does not make
all right.
sense
This
for us
is
to
a-
continue
start
I
from the top.
to
endeavored
harass
at
a witness
Miss
on this.
Miss
The evidence is there, so I'm just not sure why. It just
She applied after the
Does
phone
All right,
not
call.
make
Mr.
sense
Perkins,
at
Mr.
all.
Mr. Perkins,
And you'll
Let's
learn
not go
something
down that
for a
road.
change.
Mr.
Why don't you want to
Perkins.
learn anything?
Mr. Perkins,
Or is it
I will.
just part of the cover-up coalition?
Mr. Perkins, I remind you before I remind
You
to
should.
what Mr.
I take
Perkins just
exception to
said,
your cover-up.
Chair.
we are going to suspend for a
Absolutely.
minute. I'll bring the meeting back into order, and if I could have everyone's attention, including the official opposition. First, I'm just going to highlight the safety aspect. When everyone is talking at once, it is putting the interpreters in a very, very difficult position. We've made many changes here to ensure that their health is protected. I also want to highlight that Mr. Baines is here for about an hour because of a conflict, which I understand and appreciate him being here. He's agreed to come back. If we continue to go down this rabbit hole and debates that are happening while it's a member's turn to speak, which those items be brought up by an opposing side at a later round, we're not going to get anywhere, and we'll be back. Now, further, I'd committed not to sit next week, but if this devolves the way it is going to devolve, I might reconsider that. Well, Mr. Joyet, you be careful saying that, because we sit a lot in recess weeks, a lot, and your colleagues, I don't think. Your colleagues will not appreciate you cheerleading me on calling meetings. No, Mr. Joyet, I can assure you they won't. Anyway, if we can proceed civilly, can I say as well that Mr. Baines is an experienced parliamentarian, and I'm sure he's going to be able to provide answers to committee members on both sides. So I hope we can get through this without this devolving into a shouting match again. And I'm going to close lastly on just, again, please respect the interpreter. So, Mr. Perkins, you have about just over 4 minutes on the clock. The floor is yours again. Please begin.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I have 6 minutes left.
Oh, pardon me. You have 5 minutes on the clock. Pardon me.
I have 6 minutes on the clock. They haven't allowed me to get a single question.
Mr. Perkins, first of all, you asked a couple of questions about Mr. Baines' role as a minister, what he's responsible for, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not cutting you short. I just want you to know that you've got just over 5 minutes on the clock. The floor is yours, please, Mr. Perkins. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Baines, when I ask a yes or no question, I appreciate a yes or no, not a rag the puck. Yes or no, you called Annette Fisherian 2 times as she testified here in committee.
As I had mentioned in my previous testimony, I was responsible for over 100 governor council
please
recommendations.
answer the question, or I'm going to
so
interrupt
I don't
you
recall
constantly.
specific
Answer the question. Did you phone her twice? That was her testimony. Is she telling the truth?
As I said, I don't recall any such conversations taking place.
She testified here that 3 times that she was asked by you. Who told you to ask her?
As I've said, in 2016, a new appointments process was introduced. It was open to all Canadians, and it's not uncommon for me as a minister.
I don't need a recitation of your opening statement again, Sergeant Schultz, saying I know nothing. Look, I'll go on to the next question. 2016, you appointed
Mr. Perkins,
I
do have a point of order. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
Maybe it's a point of clarification. I believe that the witness here today is Mr. Baines. I'm not sure who Sergeant Schultz or whoever this member is referring to. Absolutely disrespectful.
Agreed, Mr. Perkins. If you could refer to Mr. Baines as the witness or Mr. Baines, it would be appreciated to maintain decorum in the committee. Thank you.
Former Liberal Minister Baines, in charge of the Liberal Green Slush Fund, you appointed Andre Lise-Matteau in 2016 under your new and clean process, correct?
As I indicated in my opening remarks, my responsibility as a minister is to appoint 7 out of the 15 board members.
And you appointed her. And while she was on the board and while you were minister, $114 million of Green Slush Fund money was voted to her companies. And you had an assistant deputy minister in every single meeting. Do you expect Canadians to believe that you knew nothing?
Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization. The management oversees the day-to-day operations, and there's a board that oversees management.
It's true.
And again,
they also
as
have
I said in my...
Cycle Capital, Andre Lise-Matteau's company, also had a lobbyist for 10 years. His name was Stephen Guilbeault. It still is Stephen Guilbeault. He lobbied for 10 years. $100 million during those 10 years went to Cycle Capital. He met 25 times with your office and you in the year before he was nominated. Do you remember any of those meetings?
During my tenure as a minister, I met with a number of stakeholders from the clean tech sector. I don't recall any specific meetings with the individuals you have mentioned.
You don't remember meeting with the now radical Liberal Environment Minister who was a nominated
order,
Liberal
Mr. Chair.
candidate? So I will ask you once again.
Mr. Perkins, one second.
I'm not sure
Yes,
why
Ms. Good.
there's name calling going on within our committee here.
He's proud of being a radical.
Please. This one I will allow. These are statements we hear in the floor.
Which you guys have established. You guys keep repeating those statements.
Miss-
So I'm not sure
Well, Miss-
why you think that it is okay
Mr.
for
Miss-
us in committee
When you get to be the
Miss-
chair of the
to
committee, you
repeat
can rule
those
on
Miss
the
and
line.
Khalid.
call them to be credible because they are not credible.
I didn't weigh in on whether they're.
You just did,
I
Chair.
said
You
I
just
said
did.
they're echoing what we hear in the House of Commons, which is permitted. Ergo,
I would
they're
appreciate
permitted here.
if the member redacts those comments.
Well, Ms. Khalid, that's not your call, Mr. Perkins.
asking you to do it, Chair.
Pardon me.
I'm asking you
Oh.
to ask the
No,
member to redact those comments because they are absolutely
No, Miss
unreasonable
Khalid,
and
Miss Khalid, I have
and
ruled
against
that
our
they are.
democratic institutions.
Ms. Khalid, I have ruled that they are in order. Mr. Perkins has the floor. You have the floor, sir.
So you don't remember meeting with radical Liberal Stephen Guilbeault. Do you remember meeting with a fellow named Gerald Butts in those meetings who was working in the PMO? Since he's listed as meeting with you on this at the same time?
As you know, when I was made minister in 2015, Mr. Butts, the individual you mentioned, worked for the Prime Minister's office.
Did he, those meetings were about funding of Cycle Capital Fund 4. That's what's listed in the public thing, and he met with you. And then EDC, after those meetings, invested in Cycle Capital Fund 4. So that happened fairly quickly. Do you remember having those discussions about having Gerald Butts and the now radical environment minister lobbying you to get funds for Cycle Capital, whose founder was on the board that you appointed, from EDC?
As I said before, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's length organization. And as you mentioned at the beginning, budgets are approved through the parliamentary budget process.
So on October 19th, only 14 days after some of those meetings, EDC announced $145 million for that. So you don't recall any of that, just like you didn't recall anything when you were at Industry Committee. Is that correct?
Could you repeat the question, please?
No, I won't repeat it again. You approved, one of the last things you did as minister was approve, after all of this corruption, you took forward another $750 million for the Green Slush Fund, which was announced a month before you left the job to go work at CIBC and now at the most expensive cell phone company in the world, Rogers. So can you tell me,
Point of order,
with
Mr.
all
Speaker.
that corruption
Point of
going
order,
on,
Mr.
why did you
Speaker.
seek $750 million of more taxpayer money?
Relevancy, the member who is before us is not about here to answer about his future life, but here to answer about SDTC.
Well, if you get the wax out of your ears, you hear that I asked about the $750 million approved by Cabinet that he took for the Green Slush Fund.
Mr. Perkins, your actions are just encouraging them to be belligerent to the chair as you're being belligerent to the chair. I would ask you to cease and desist when a point of order is called. Mr. Drouin, the same goes for you, Mr. Drouin. I allow members on both sides latitude to probe. There is no question of relevance here. Mr. Perkins, Mr. Perkins was, Mr. Perkins is, just let me finish. Mr. Perkins is, as all members are entitled to ask the questions in the manner they please, but his question is clearly, from what I can see, going in the direction of the topic we're studying. Ms. Khalid, do you have a point of order?
Yeah, on the same point of order that was raised by Monsieur Drouin, I don't see how the wax in his ears has anything to do with the questions that are being asked today.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins, you have. I'll back the clock up. You have the question again. Go ahead.
So I'll make it simple for you, Mr. Bain, since that seems to be the only way to try and get an answer. After $114 million went to Andre Lise-Matteau's companies, you went to Cabinet seeking another $750 million for the Green Slush Fund when 25% of the money was going to Cycle Capital, which Stephen Guilbeault owned shares on, was a lobbyist for. Why did you go to Cabinet for another $750 million for such a corrupt organization?
As been discussed before, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's length organization. The management oversees the day-to-day operations. There's an independent board that oversees them, and the budget process is debated in the House of Commons and approved by the House, and these monies are allocated to promote and support the clean tech sector.
Chair, I think this witness is in contempt of this committee since he refuses to answer a question and keeps repeating his either written PMO
Point of
speaking
order,
points
Chair.
or not. That's all he's doing.
Well, I think we're just
Point of order,
starting,
Chair.
and as skilled parliamentarians, you'll have repeated opportunities to get to Mr. Baines answered. Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Chair, I doubt that the member opposite has the qualifications to make those allegations. I believe that it is up to you to decide whether somebody's in contempt or not, and I personally don't think that anybody has been in contempt so far.
Very much. Mr. Perkins, could you ask your question again, and then we will get an answer and move on.
Very simple. Why did you seek $750 million more for this organization that was funneling money to your Liberal appointments when you knew it was a corrupt organization, and you went forward to give them more money from the taxpayer to further feather bed your political appointees and the Prime Minister's political appointees? Are you really that corrupt?
Budgets are approved by Parliament, and as I said, this is an independent organization that oversees the disbursement of these funds.
Thank you very much. Next up, for Mr. Drouin, for 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say, I'm still questioning as to the reason why Mr. Baines is before our committee, as Mr. Perkins and both Mr. Cooper got to ask him questions in June, and I'm wondering their competency in auditing, whether or not they are competent to actually ask questions. Because obviously when you get the time to ask questions, you would think that you'd get to the bottom of this, but obviously this is not about getting to the bottom of this, and we've seen it. I've only been here for about 5 meetings, and we're still in the spirit of asking who briefed you, who briefed the witness, and who appointed you to the board. And I find it funny because Mr. Perkins was appointed by a Conservative to a board, and he was appointed in 2008, but in the press release, I don't see that he previously worked for a Conservative government, but we know he did that. And now he has the audacity to ask who appointed who to a certain board. And the funny thing, I find it, I can't, Mr. Chair, I can't find,
Point of order?
I can't stop laughing. Because it's
Point
actually funny because it's
I
hypocritical.
have a point of order, Mr. Drouin. Yes, Mr. Perkins.
Point of order, relevance. We're not here to talk about the BDC appointments.
Yes.
We're here to talk about the Liberal Green Slush Fund. And I know that's a confusing thing
Thank
for
you.
MP Jurin.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. And again, I think Mr. Drouin is having he's a bit off topic. Mr. Drouin,
You guys stole $400 million.
Okay, Mr. Perkins, we will be back to official opposition members soon. Mr. Drouin, you have the floor again, please.
He actually provides me a great segue. As Mrs. Versturen, who they want to make the Canadians believe that she's a Liberal, but like Mr. Perkins, donated the same exact amount, $1,600 to a Conservative leader potential candidate and the last Tory candidate. Same amount of money. The same amount of money. Mr. Perkins, I can't stop the hypocrisy.
Good for the goose.
L'hypocrisie l'autre côté.
The hypocrisy on the other side is incredible. So you'll allow me.
Mr. Perkins.
The appointment of Ms. Verschuren.
Mr. Perkins, you can just. whoa les motards a little bit.
Slow down a bit.
You have the floor again.
Well, it's all public records. And I wonder if they were holding hands when they donated together. But again, I've warned this at the last committee. I'm not interested in going into a wild goose chase. And right now, we are entertaining a wild goose chase. They're trying really hard. They're trying really, really hard to make a connection between a minister and some low-level bureaucrat who committed errors. And we're not saying on this side that they haven't committed errors. We agree. But the idea that the minister was connected to that is baloney. And it's just baloney. Well, Mr. Brock, if you were in the courtroom, you would have been fired and disbarred from the Law Society of Ontario, Mr. Brock.
Gentlemen, we're doing ourselves no favors here. I would ask that we respect Mr. Drouin's time. You have the floor again.
So, Mr. Chair, my point is I've read the transcript from Mr. Bain's appearance at the Indu Committee, and to this day, I have not learned, in the last 6 minutes, have not learned anything new from Mr. Perkins' questioning, other than the fact that they will interrupt Mr. Bains. They will ask them a yes or no questions, knowing full well that he does not know the answer because SDTC is arm's length. And it's always been arm's length. The idea that the minister has direct control over the decisions and the financial decisions of SDTC is out of touch.
Do your homework. You've only been here 5
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Perkins maybe has a right. Maybe his experience at BDC.
Mr. Drouin, I'm just going to try to bring order here. Ms. Khalid, if you have a point of order, I appreciate everyone to say point of order. Otherwise, I just think you're participating in the fun fight that's going across.
Point of order,
Is it a point of order? Yes,
Chair?
please.
I would appreciate if colleagues can not holler and yell and shriek across the way. My colleague is sitting right beside me, and I can't even hear him based on all of the shrieking that is happening from those
Thank you,
folks
Ms.
over there.
Khalid. I too would appreciate that. And again, unfortunately, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I would ask that all sides refrain from speaking when an individual has the floor. And Mr. Drouin has the floor, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I can tell I'm ruffling some feathers if we want to talk about goose and ganders and whatnot. But again, perhaps Mr. Perkins has some other idea of how boards work, and perhaps he was breathed down the neck when he was appointed at the BDC, and perhaps ministers' offices were breathing down his necks to make decisions, but that's not how we operate. We change the process. We change the way people are appointed to this to different boards, and it's actually on websites. So the idea that this was some secret liberal board appointees that somehow benefited our friends and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm still waiting for my friends to say, thank you so much, Frank, for having benefited to my personal wealth. I have none. So I'll go back again to the rationale as to why Mr. Bains is here is because there was some No. There was some issues with the fact of a testimony, which that testimony, the witness later corrected, and it's on the record. She later corrected. I mean, the idea that somebody would somehow accepted an appointment without having applied is ridiculous. Name me any employer who would say, I named this person my employee without having applied. Hey, les gars, là, vous faites pas de sens.
Guys, it doesn't make any sense. You make 0 sense. And you're here, and once again, people applied. These people, Mr. Perkins and Mr. Cooper, had the opportunity to interview and ask questions to Mr. Bains already. And the fact that he's here once again at another committee with the same people makes no sense. 0 sense. I have no question for Mr. Bains. I understand very well. I saw the transcript of the last meeting in June. It didn't take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months for these people to accuse even before he answered.
We're going to go through a certain issue You're gonna be asked a yes or no answer. You're going to be accused. They're going to opine on certain facts that they will not allow you to answer because they will interrupt you, and that's the way it's gone at Indu Committee. And unfortunately, it's the way it's going to go at this committee, and I apologize for this, but we know you had nothing to do with this. There were certain people that had something to do with it, but it was never connected to a minister's office. It was never, and I know you guys are trying hard. Really, I know, Mr. Perkins, maybe it worked at that time when you were at the BDC,
Thank you,
but it certainly does not work at this committee and with the way we appointed people.
That
ignore
is,
testimony.
Mr. Perkins, Mr.
You
Durain,
ignore the testimony.
Mr. Perkins, we will be back to your side. That is the time. Maintenant, c'est Madame St-Clair.
Now, Ms. St-Clair Desgagnés for 6 minutes, please. I'd like to take the first seconds of my time to ask colleagues to please take a deep breath because we have work to do, and I invite my colleagues from the government side to give me their time if they have no questions for Mr. Baines. I have a number of them. So, Mr. Baines, what is your relationship with Amber Batul?
Merci.
Thank you very much for your question.
I worked with Ms. Batul when I was at CIBC.
Vous ne connaissez pas
You didn't know Ms. Batul when she was chief of staff of SDTC?
Désolé.
I'm sorry.
Please, sorry, I didn't hear.
Vous ne connaissiez pas Madame
You didn't know Ms. Batul when she worked at SDTC?
I think I met her maybe once or twice at an event.
Donc Madame Batul.
So Ms. Batul was the chief of staff of SDTC, and you hadn't spoken to her more than once or twice at the time. Yet Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC. She obtained a position just after you at CIBC. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Once again, they're suspecting that this was a decision made at CIBC. This has nothing to do with SDTC. Can we stick to SDTC? Mr. Drouin, we let you talk about anything when it was your turn. We heard about Mr. Perkins and I don't know what else, but so now Mr. Baines knows very well how to speak. He can answer the questions asked by Ms. St-Clair Desgagnés that she's asking very respectfully.
Madame St-Clair.
So, Madame St-Clair Desgagnés, you have the floor. I think some people are afraid of the answers Mr. Baines could give. So, I'll start again. Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC. Once again, Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a point of order. This has no relation to the decision. If Ms. St-Clair Desgagnés suspects that Mr. Baines made the decision to hire this woman, she needs evidence.
You're on beyond less than thin ice because we just listened to you. The chair allowed you to go on for 6 minutes about yes, and I stopped the clock every time that happened to give you your time. But now for you to jump in and say that another member who's trying to ask questions to the witness can't be allowed to do so. I'm not sure who you think you are.
I don't, Mr. Chair. I think about relevancy of this. Like, why are we here? We are here to study SDTC, not CIBC, not Rogers, not anything else. SDTC.
And the members' questions are
Point
going
of order, Chair.
exactly in that direction. Yes, Ms. Kelly.
Point of order, Chair. I take exception to you questioning who Mr. Drouin thinks he is. He is a member of Parliament with the exact same privileges that we all have in this committee, and I don't think exactly. We have the privileges that we have within this committee, and I don't think that is something that you should be calling out.
That is correct, and Mr. Durain was given an opportunity to speak. Now, Madame St-Clair Desgagnés, it's not up to Mr. Durain to suddenly decide that what another member is asking is relevant or not.
Why do we have point of orders, Mr. Chair?
Well, again, I ruled on it, and now I'm moving on. Mr. Perkins, you had a point of order as well.
My point of order is about Mr. Drouin. From the moment I asked my first question within the first minute, he was interrupting. He chose as a tactic to try and disrupt every single sentence I said. Now he's doing it to the block member. It's a specific tactic to disrupt the committee, And because of his disruptive behavior, I would ask you consider that you not allow him to speak or remove him from the committee.
I would ask the same favor for Mr. Perkins who interrupted me.
Gentlemen, let's try to proceed with this. I would ask that Madame Sinclair Desgagnés be allowed to continue her questioning.
J'ai été interrompue plusieurs fois.
I was interrupted a number of times. So you can ask your question again. And once you've concluded,
Commencez
I'll begin at 5 minutes.
à 5 minutes. Just attends, j'ai encore une point d'ordre.
Wait, there's another point of order.
Chair, I think it's only fair that Madame Sinclair Desgagnés gets her full 6 minutes at this point.
Well, Ms. Khalid is certainly going to, pardon me, Madame Sinclair va certainement
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés will certainly have her 6 minutes, so you can ask your question again.
But the interruption is happening because of the numerous points of order, which are, as I said, a little thin about relevance. When I'm going to allow members, and always have, a lot of latitude. Vas-y, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Je remercie.
I'd like to thank my colleague opposite, and especially Mr. Drouin, for his mansplaining on the topic of study. Let's continue. Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC, and I received as information that you had a number of meetings with her while she was Chief of Staff at SDTC. You say it's not the case, that you maybe met her once or twice, but that's contrary to the information I've received.
Confirmer avec vous.
I'd like to confirm with you.
As I've said before, I may have met her a few times. I don't recall a specific number of times. Again, SDTC is an arm's length organization where the management oversees the day-to-day operation.
Merci.
Thank you. When you say a number of times, is this once or twice, or is it more like 10 or 15? To give an idea.
Again, I can't put a specific number on it. It was over 6 years ago. I dealt with a number of people during my tenure as a minister. And so, as a minister,
D'accord. Merci.
Okay, thank you. Have you participated?
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Did you participate in her hiring at CIBC?
Again,
Si vous
I'm
la
here to
connaissez pas.
talk about
If you didn't know her.
Development Technology Canada and any questions you have pertaining to that.
Mes questions, c'est mon temps.
My questions, it's my time. I can ask you questions about the fact that you may have been a part of the hiring process for Ms. Batul. And if you didn't know her or hardly knew her, why did you participate? Did you push for her hiring at CIBC?
Vous allez voir où je vais en venir.
You'll see where I'm going. It has a relation with SDTC, so please answer.
Yeah, as I said, I'm more than pleased to answer any questions pertaining to Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Monsieur le Président, j'arrive.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting to SDTC. I'm asking questions that are related to SDTC.
S'il vous plaît,
Please ask your question again.
Donc, pour la
So for the third time, I ask if you participated in the hiring process, the recruitment process for Ms. Batul at CIBC following your meetings with her as Chief of Staff of SDTC.
So as I've mentioned, I met with Ms. Batul when I was a minister. I don't recall the number of times specifically. And as I've also highlighted, Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Merci. Donc,
Thank you.
donc vous pouvez pas.
So you can't say that the fact that you met her beforehand when she was Chief of Staff at SDTC influenced your decision to bring her to CIBC afterward. You deny that it was related. Your work with her, your meetings with her when she was at SDTC have nothing to do with the fact that she went and worked with you at CIBC.
As I've mentioned before, the management oversees the day-to-day operations at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, which is an arm's length organization.
Merci,
And my
mais
sole
Thank you, but you're not answering the question. It's a pretty simple question. Did your meetings with Ms. Batul when she was Chief of Staff at SDTC have an impact on your recruitment of Ms. Batul at CIBC? This is a question you can answer with yes or no, please, Mr. Baines.
It's an arm's length organization that oversees SDTC, and my responsibility as a minister was to appoint 7 of the 15 board members.
Je pense que je ne...
I don't think I'll obtain an answer from you on this, so I'll move to the next topic. A question that came up earlier. Who encouraged you to hire or name Ms. Verschuren? Was it someone internal to the department?
With respects to the individual, Ms. Verschuren, as you know, she had an impeccable track record. She was appointed by Stephen Harper
Ouais,
in
j'ai demandé qui.
2006.
I asked who. Who? Was it, for example, Andrew Noseworthy who encouraged you to hire her? Mr. Noseworthy, did he have anything to do with that process?
There was a new process established in 2016 that was open to all Canadians, and
D'accord.
it's an
Point of order,
open.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Killian.
Even though I'm sitting quite far away from my Conservative colleagues, I heard one of them call Mr. Baines a liar, which I think is not only disrespectful but also goes against our standing orders.
On the same point of order.
Yes, Mr. Brock.
I'm sitting with my Conservative colleagues. I heard no such thing. But more importantly, I laugh at
You
many
laughed
things.
at it.
I laugh at many things. I didn't laugh at that because I didn't
You
hear
laughed
it.
at it.
Chair, on that same point of order, I'm actually getting quite frustrated. I'm sure other members are getting frustrated at the obvious attempts of this particular witness, a former Minister of the Crown, who is deliberately wasting time, not answering a direct question that's put to him, repeating the same talking lines over and over again.
Thank you.
From the same testimony
Mr.
that
Brock,
he gave at Industry on June the 5th, 2004.
Chair?
I'm asking the chair to interject and get this witness to answer the question.
Point of order.
Just one, I've got a couple lined up here. Mr. Cooper, I think did you have a point of order you want to make? No, okay, Ms.
I would
Ms. Kelly?
appreciate if Mr. Cooper would apologize to Mr. Baines for calling him a liar. We all know that when witnesses come to this committee, they are under obligation to be truthful, and I know for a fact that Mr. Baines, through his, not just his ministry, but also through the work he's done throughout his entire life, he's been a truthful and principled person, and I take personal exception. I take personal exception. I take personal exception not only to members in the Conservatives laughing right now, but also to somebody who is an innocent person being maligned by the Conservatives, and this is their go-to, their motto.
Why don't I hear from Mr. Cooper now?
Of hearing time and time again. This is absolutely unreasonable, Chair.
Thank you.
Well, on the same point of order, perhaps Mr. Baines can apologize to taxpayers
Okay.
for $400 million.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
That's
Okay.
absolutely
Point of order,
Ladies
Mr.
and
Chair.
gentlemen,
Retract those comments.
Okay. All right.
That happened when he was the minister.
I'm not in a position to.
So standing order 117 says that you have an authority to maintain order, but anything related to
My job is to my job. According to order. According to so the standing orders lay out my role, which is to attempt to maintain order and hopefully succeed that. In terms of any kind of censure, that needs to be reported to the House if you wish to pursue it. I'm going to go back to Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, s'il vous plaît. Vous avez la parole pour.
You have the floor for about 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, We're trying to do our work, and I think this witness is key to the whole study of SDTC, so I'd like for him to answer the questions that are specific and that there is an end to the interruptions to questions. I'm just trying to do my work here. So, Mr. Noseworthy, did he have anything to do with the selection process of Ms. Verschuren? Yes or no?
There is a panel that was set up as part of this new
Est-ce que Monsieur
appointment
Noseworthy
Was Mr. Noseworthy on that panel
ou dans la sélection du
or in the selection of the panel?
the Privy Council office and included the relevant departments.
D'accord. Encore une fois,
Okay, once again, was Mr. Noseworthy part of that panel or part of the selection of that panel?
I don't recall the specific members of the panel. I do know that the Privy Council office led the panel.
y a-t-il moyen que vous ayez accès,
Is there a way for you to access that information? If so, can you send it to us to the committee,
s'il vous plaît?
please?
You're asking about the panel composition?
Oui.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my understanding is the Privy Council office will be speaking
Bon.
on this matter, and I believe they will have the relevant information that you have requested.
Parfait.
Perfect. Because I don't think I'm telling you anything new. Mr. Noseworthy was in a situation of a conflict of interest. He knew Ms. Verschuren. He was friends with her. So even in selecting the board of directors, there could have been favoritism. And as minister responsible, you could have seen all of that and act accordingly. So my question is the following. When you made your announcement with great fanfare, $46 million in January 2020, of the 14 companies that were funded 4 years ago, if you don't remember things 8 years ago, maybe you'll remember things 4 years ago, 5 companies received COVID money without being analyzed on a case-by-case basis. So one was not eligible. So nearly half of the companies that you were proud to fund were not really eligible. What does that mean to you today? Or do you feel absolutely no regret about everything you did as minister responsible for this type of situation?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for your question.
Decisions that were made by the management and the board were independent. And as I had mentioned, it's an arm's length organization, and there are clear rules in place to determine how these funds should be dispersed, and those rules needed to be followed.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Suivant, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Baines, for being present in this important work. As you're likely aware, the work of public accounts is one that looks at Auditor General's reports, an independent office that has found a way to verify specific instances of very serious issues related to public trust and related to the accountability that's needed to Canadians in regards to potential breaches of the Act, to which I hope you can help clarify. The Auditor General's report, page 6, her overall message is that they found, quote, significant lapses in Sustainable Development Technology Canada's governance and stewardship of public funds. It goes on to suggest that the Board of Directors of Sustainable Development Technology Canada did not ensure that the foundation complied with its enabling legislation. Mr. Baines, are you aware of the enabling legislation of SDTC?
Are you referring to the legislation that was passed by the House of Commons?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the act that ultimately determines the role of the minister to appoint members to Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
And who was the minister between the time of 2015 and 2021?
As I stated in my opening remarks, in 2015 November, I took on the role at ISED, and I left on January the 12th of 2021.
Much for that, Mr. Baines. So you would agree that you were the minister responsible at the time for compliance of the Act during that period of time?
As I indicated in my opening remarks, the role of the minister is to appoint 7 of the 15 board members to this organization, which is independent and it is arm's length.
And just so that people are aware, did you in fact appoint those members? Did you appoint the satisfactory amount required by the board?
I believe there were a number of appointments that were made during my tenure.
Did you or were you aware that the board had supported reducing that number to 2?
Could you repeat that in terms of the board did?
Of course. No, I'm happy to repeat, Mr.
Elaborate?
Baines.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Baines, I'm happy to repeat this and to clarify this for you. Perhaps it's easier if I can ask whether or not you've read the Auditor General's report.
I did read the report.
Okay, Mr. Baines, if you read the report, it suggests in that report that the minister is required to appoint the satisfactory amount of board members. After that period of time, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt to suggest that maybe you did in fact do the work needed as the minister responsible to appoint the satisfactory amount. The issue that the Auditor General is pointing out is the fact that the board was then reduced to 2 people. These 2 people, including Ms. Verturen, would go on, and it would be difficult during their tenureship at that time of the board. They would go on to find or engage in direct conflicts of interest, to which the Auditor General has found to be pertinent to many, many companies, including her own company that had received government funds. And this is the crux of the issue, Mr. Baines, and one that I think Canadians want serious attention to, and one that they need real accountability to. And I understand that you have to get going in 5 minutes, and this is going to be probably my last round to ask questions, and I do appreciate you being here. I don't necessarily appreciate the lack of answers, but that's your prerogative. My prerogative is to ask the questions. Your prerogative is to answer them, and if you don't want to answer them or haven't read the report, that's completely up to you, and that's the sense I'm getting at this point. But I think you'd understand the issue that I have and Canadians have and the Auditor General has. You're responsible as a minister to ensure that the enabling legislation to which you are a minister responsible for is followed, and at that time was appropriately enforced. The Auditor General is pointing out a very serious fact, Mr. Baines, that during your tenureship, that did not happen. In addition to these very serious concerns, Mr. Baines, there was a very legitimate issue that you were responsible for, which was the attendance of an Assistant Deputy Minister named Mr. Andrew Noseworthy within your ministry. Mr. Andrew Noseworthy was you were directly his supervisor, directly responsible for him. You've met Mr. Noseworthy, correct?
Mr. Noseworthy did work at ISED.
And you met him, right?
That is correct. Yes, I had met with Mr. Noseworthy.
And you had many conversations with Mr. Noseworthy, I presume.
Several conversations over my tenure during minister at ISED.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Baines. And one of the issues that we found with Mr. Noseworthy was that he didn't know what his job was. And what kind of boss, in this case the minister, would have an employee, a very senior executive employee, Assistant Deputy Minister, who the Auditor General had to unfortunately describe as someone who didn't know their job or didn't know their roles or responsibilities, to be exact, in relation to the fact that they were present. This person, one of your staff members, was present in the decision-making process of a board of 2 people that ended up giving themselves millions of dollars. That's a serious concern, Mr. Baines, and one that Canadians are upset about. It's harmed the very real and legitimate policy of ensuring Canadians get access to innovation funding for small and medium-sized businesses. And I'd encourage my colleagues to take this issue far more seriously than we have today, because there's a very likely fact, which is Mr. Andrew Noseworthy knew that he was likely going to find himself in a position where maybe he had to report to you as the minister responsible for what he had heard at the 2-person board meeting he was at. At any point in time, do you think he was ever going to question whether or not you would ask him what his roles and responsibilities are?
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. It is my intention to get through a truncated additional round, so I'm going to cut you off there. we're going to have government and official opposition members will have 4 minutes each. The two remaining parties will have 2 minutes each. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Former Liberal Minister Baines, you led the committee to believe that you had no active role in the appointment of Ms. Verscheren beyond receiving a recommendation from the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, as part of a so-called open, transparent, and merit-based process. You know that that isn't true, just as you knew it wasn't true when you misled committee in June. Isn't that right, former Liberal Minister Baines?
Thank you very much for the question. As I've highlighted before, Ms. Verscheren was appointed by Stephen Harper, Jim Flaherty, Christian
Former
Parody.
Liberal Minister Baines, let's follow the chronology of events leading to Ms. Verscheren's appointment, someone who was in a conflict of interest at the time that you appointed her. On March 15th, 2019...
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Is the former employer of the official opposition's wife out of order in calling
Ms.
Mr.
Khalid,
Baines the
come on.
names that he's calling him?
You in fact are up next, so you will have a 4 minute right to the floor at which you'll be able to take full use of it. Mr. Cooper, you have just over 3 minutes, please.
Former Liberal Minister Baines, let's follow the chronology of events leading to Ms. Verscheren's appointment. In September and October 2018, the PCO received 54 applications for chair of SDTC. On March 15, 2019, they provided you with a short list of 5 recommended candidates. That's the process you keep referencing. You sat on your hands. You ignored the recommendation of PCO. In April 2019, according to Ms. Verscheren, you called her. You asked her to serve as the chair of SDTC. All of a sudden, on April 30th of 2019, 1.5 months after you had a short list of 5 recommended candidates, she applies, and on May 21st, 2019, the PCO adds her name to the short list, and you thereafter appoint her. Do you really expect this committee and Canadians to believe that she was picked as part of a transparent, independent, merit-based process, and that you didn't have your hand involved in picking her? Is that what you want Canadians to believe?
It was an open, transparent, merit-based process, and as I've highlighted, former Prime Minister...
No, what happened here, what happened, former Liberal Minister Baines, is that you didn't follow the process. You didn't respect the process. You politically interfered in the process.
As I was trying to state before, Ms. Verscheren was appointed by Stephen Harper to the Canadian North American Competitiveness Council in 2006. Jim
Did the
Flaherty
other 5
to
recommended candidates have conflicts of interest with SDTC? Because Ms. Verscheren had a conflict of interest. What happened about the other 5 candidates?
They did.
Again, when we're speaking about Ms. Verscheren, I was highlighting the fact that she was appointed by Christian Parody, the former Minister to Science, Technology,
Mr. Baines, you're not
Innovation
answering my
Council.
question. I asked you, did the other 5 candidates also have conflicts of interest? Because Ms. Verscheren had a conflict of interest at the time you appointed her. $12 million that her company was receiving from SDTC, and you knew about that.
Mr. Cooper, I have a point of
All
order.
public
All due
office.
respect.
Sorry, Mr.
And
Baines.
I truly respect Mr. Cooper, but he's asking the witness to opine on some other members that were part of a board. I just don't know what what Mr. Baines can say. We know that the former employer of the leader's wife is asking tough questions.
This is not a point
Well, it is a tough
of order.
Well, it would be dismissed. It'd be thrown out of court if it was the real court. But this is a kangaroo court.
As government members are prone to remind this committee, we are not a court. This is a question and answer session. So,
thank you so much.
I've said that before many times because it is not a court. We're here to ask questions and receive answers. So, Mr. Cooper, you may proceed.
Mr. Baines, did the other 5 candidates have conflicts of interest as Ms. Verscheren did? Yes or no?
It's important to note that all public office holders must respect and follow the Conflict of Interest Act.
You were advised that Ms. Verscheren had a conflict of interest, and you appointed her anyway. I'm asking you about the other 5 candidates. You refuse to answer, and I take it that they didn't have conflicts of interest, and you appointed someone with a conflict because you don't give a damn about conflicts of interest. Isn't that right, former Liberal Minister Baines?
During my tenure, I made over 100 governor and council recommendations, and it's important that all those individuals that were recommended and ultimately appointed follow the Conflict of
You
Interest
knew she
Act.
had a conflict of interest. You
that
didn't
is
give
the
a
time,
damn,
Mr.
and as a
Cooper.
result, $400 million taxpayer dollars have gone out the door.
Mr. Cooper, I will just remind you that Mr. Cooper, I will remind you, as I was reminded today in the House, that we will use parliamentary language in this committee room. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as much as I appreciate my opposition colleagues trying to get their clips for the Russian Rebel News, I do have some serious questions to ask our witness here today.
All right. Yes, Mr. Brock.
Here we go again with
the
yet
Russian Rebel
another
News.
Liberal who is trying to associate the Conservative Party of Canada with the Russian administration.
Mr. Brock.
There were members in the House.
Mr. Brock, whoa. I did hear what was said by the member, and it has nothing to do with the Conservative Party. This is not a point of order, even if
Point of order,
was.
Mr. Chair?
I'm ruling in your side's favor. So I'm going to give the floor back to Ms. Khalid, unless you actually have a genuine new point of order.
Well, I would invite Mr. Brock to look at the FBI records.
No, stop. All right. We really don't want to go down in the U.S. politics or bring U.S. politics into this committee room. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor, please.
Half your cabinet isn't, though.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just going to put some things on the record with respect to the topic that we are talking about today. And Mr. Baines, I really appreciate your patience with our opposition colleagues on everything that they've been hammering at you with today. So Prime Minister Mulroney asked that Ms. Verscheren serve on his National Science and Tech Committee, and Minister Flaherty tapped her as an economic advisor to serve on his Economic Council during the 2008 recession. And she's donated to the Simcoe Gray Conservative Association between 2013 to 2015. She's donated to Lisa Raitt. She's donated consistently since 2013 to the Conservative Party federally, and also donated to the last 2 leadership campaigns. Can you help me in understanding how partisanship works with these kind of appointments, please?
Thank you very much for the question. As I highlighted, it's important to note that in 2016, there was a new process that was put into place. And this process was designed to encourage all Canadians to apply to various positions that were made available to different organizations and agencies. And the Prime Minister or the Privy Council office basically led this panel with the various departments. They ultimately made recommendations and brought forward names to the minister. Then the minister would make a GIC recommendation. As being discussed before, the process was open, it was fair, it was transparent, and specifically with regards to Ms. Verscheren, as you can tell, she had worked with the previous government in different roles. She also received the Order of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Baines.
She was a well-recognized CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Baines.
And so
And I'm sure that you'll be able to provide all of the rest of what you were going to say in writing for the committee to understand and appreciate. And given that we've been talking, sorry, Mr. Perkins, I couldn't hear myself over your voice, but given that that we've been talking about the Auditor General's report and everything that has been going on, I do want to move a motion right now on this topic, and that motion is that the committee reaffirm the independence of the Auditor General of Canada to conduct her work free from interference and echo the concerns of the Auditor General of Canada regarding the Conservative Party House Order of June 10th, 2024, that ordering her office to produce her audit file on Sustainable Development Technology Canada to the law clerk and Parliamentary Council compromises her independence and is likely to discourage departments, agencies, and Crown corporations from providing free and timely access to information required for her audits to go forward. And Chair, I would love to talk more about this motion, but I do want to make sure that it's in order given the topic today.
Have you submitted the motion to the chair?
I'm about to. I read it into the record right now, Chair, but I'm more than happy to put it into in writing for all members as well.
So you don't have it in?
I don't have it in writing right now, but I can get it to you as soon as possible.
All right.
Would you like to suspend while we do that?
What's a point of privilege? This is new. Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I'd like to raise a point of privilege. And I would ask, as part of that point of privilege, because the witness has refused to answer questions, he has repeated one line consistently for an hour, and obviously written by PMO to try and protect from the corruption. So I would move the following motion as a point of privilege, that the committee instruct the clerk and analyst to prepare a report to the House, which the chair shall table forthwith, outlining the potential breach of privilege concerning Navdeep Bain's refusal to answer questions which the committee put to him.
All right, I'm going to consult with the clerk here. I'm going to suspend for a few minutes. And in the meantime, Ms. Khalid, if you could send it in to
speak about it as well.
Hold on, I'm going to suspend. Just once. I do not like to do this, but I can also see this is going to go on for a little bit. Mr. Bains, I'm going to excuse you because I know you had a.
Before that decision is made, I'd like to discuss that.
No. This I've got to suspend here to go over. I now have competing motions. Mr. Bains is on the clock. He made it very clear to me beforehand. Agree. No, I'm going to finish my thought here. I appreciate him coming. He was. I had also, through the clerk, discussed with him the possible and perhaps likely need that he might need to come back, and he is aware of that. So that is my ruling, Mr. Brock. Mr. Bains, you are excused. I appreciate you coming in, and I'm sure the clerk will reach out to you. Ms. Khalid had asked for some information, and if you could submit that to the clerk as well. In the meantime, I'm going to suspend just for about 3 minutes here, and if you could submit your motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Please, if members can take their chair. So I'm going to call things back into order. So I have two motions on the floor, and I don't have the first motion yet to the clerk to disseminate for discussion. So, Mr. Perkins, I'm going to turn to you. You have the floor on your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, point of order. Just 1
second, Mr. Perkins. I have a point of order from Mr. Erskine Smith.
Can we? I'm a bit confused as to the traditional path here is you move the first motion that is moved and it was read into the record. The interpreters interpreted it for us, so we've got it in both official languages. And I would like to hear from the clerk as to what the proper process is, because this is backwards as far as anything I've seen in 10 years.
Mr. Genuis, you have a point of order?
Yeah, so just respectfully to clarify the rules for my my honourable friend, Ms. Khalid, if you'd like to speak on this point of order, you can propose to do so.
Would you like to do the chair's job for him?
You're welcome to continue heckling. I suppose I'll just ignore you, I guess. But just for the members that are interested in knowing, the process is that when there is a question
Point of order,
privilege,
Mr. Chair.
The chair
can make the own rulers.
rules
I love
on
Mr.
the
Garnett,
question
but he
of
doesn't
privilege.
need to explain this to the committee.
You know, another rule, Mr. Duran, is you don't speak unless you're recognized, even if you
Thank
think
you,
you have a
Mr.
point of
And
order,
also,
which you don't.
On that point of order, Chair.
All right.
Permanent member, then we'll respect.
All right,
On
look.
that point of order, Chair.
What
I'd
is
like to hear
wrong
from
with
Mr.
you?
Genuis, please.
We have 4 conservative members in this committee right now. We have a 5th one who has come in and is now on the speaking order. I'm not sure who he's subbing or who he's replacing here.
Just for the Liberal members, there's a green book. You can get it for free. That explains the rules. So. What Mr. Perkins has done is he's raised a question of privilege.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
The chair
Mr.
then,
Garnett has been subbed in for
if he
another
considers
member?
it a matter dealing with privilege,
Has he been subbed in for another
then
member?
privilege
Just
supersedes.
1 second, Mr. Genuis. If you could, your whip will sub in your members as requested.
I'd like to know who he's replacing.
I see 4 members on the other side.
Because we have a
I
couple
see
of
5.
votes on order.
So, yes. Yeah.
It's been many times in this committee we've come to this point, I believe, Chair. I think we can reflect in the last 3 years. There's been moments where this kind of disruption's taken place in the past, but there's 2 concerns that I think are really important while we have this, whatever this is. One is I think the interpreters, I think if we can find a way to make this as easy as possible for them, that's great. Second, a speaking list maybe could be instituted by you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to tell you how to do your job. Certainly not. That's what I'm saying. Just that perhaps the speaking order or speaking list could help us to predict when we should speak and when some people shouldn't. Thank you.
So you're absolutely right, and I am hearing points of order right now. I just heard from Mr. Erskine-Smith, and Mr. Genuis has the floor. Mr. Genuis had informed me before. I was expecting him to speak on his other motion, which he's not doing, but you have the floor, Mr. Genuis, on the point of order.
Yes, sorry, I was just responding to the point of order from Mr. Erskine-Smith, and I hope this is helpful. I'm not trying to start a needless conflict. It's just that we're all guided by rules, and those rules are well established. That when there's a question of privilege, that much as is happening in the House right now, that supersedes other business. So if the chair rules that it is a matter touching on privilege, then that supersedes the other matters. To Mr. Erskine-Smith's point, it's not as if someone just moved a motion on another topic. It has unique status as a privilege motion. So again, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Khalid, do you have a point of order, or is it moot now?
I'm just, wondering if you've been satisfied by Mr. Genuis doing your and the clerk's job for you.
Yes. Mr. Duran.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would also entertain the fact that a point of privilege was raised on whether or not a question was answered, and I don't recall in any committee in 9 years as to the quality of responses that we were provided at any committee in the past 9 years, 20 years, 15 years, 30 years, and so on, and so on, and so on. The quality of answers are not a question of privilege, and I would divert to you, Mr. Williamsons, for the answer.
Arrive scam. Christian first.
Thank you very much.
I just also want another point
No,
of
hold
order,
on.
Chair.
I've got as Mr. usually said. I have several points of order. I believe Mr. Erskine-Smith in a second, but I'm going to hear Mr. Perkins first.
So the confusion here, and it started with a legitimate question by MP Erskine-Smith about a motion that was moved by Ms. Khalid, and then I moved and put forward a privilege motion about whether I think the question was that you could whether you can do those two things at the same time. And the precedent was set, yes, the precedent was set in 2020 in FINA on a similar item when there was a motion on the floor, and then our current leader, Mr. Poilievre, moved a question of privilege during it because a question of privilege takes precedent over everything else. MP Khalid's asked if we could circulate my motion of privilege. It's been sent to the clerk, so hopefully we can get that out. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Okay, so I think I've got it clear then. So if there's a legitimate motion for privilege, that will take precedence. In this particular case, that seems unlikely, but that's the process as far as it goes. I've got it clear. The condescension is not needed, Garnett, but it's nice to hear from you.
I was more responding to thank you. I might, Ms. Kelly, did you have a point of order, or you? No, okay. Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés, s'il vous plaît.
Sir, Ms. Sinclair-Desgagnés, simply to ask if we could suspend until we have the privilege motion in both official languages. That would be very helpful, so that our teams can look at the French version, please.
I will. I'm going to suspend for 2 or 3 minutes. I'll bring the meeting back into order. So after discussing with the chair, reviewing some of the standing orders, and also reviewing some precedent, I am going to recognize Mr. Perkins' motion as a privilege motion. Now, first, the first step is that you're flagging and I'll come to you in just 1 second, Mr. Erskine-Smith. Why don't you hear what I have to say, and then we can have, I'm sure, points of order discussions about it. So, possibly. I lost, and so I'm going to uphold that your belief that you believe your privileges have been infringed upon, which then triggers your motion. So I will turn to you, Mr. Perkins, to now speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason I move this, for all of those who are watching, part of this process of being accountable to Parliament is for witnesses to actually answer the questions that we pose. And I'll go through a series of some of the questions that were asked that I'm aware of, and I'm sure others may add a little more to it, that were very simple questions put to the former Liberal minister, but he refused to answer them and basically kept repeating the lines in his opening statement, the same line over and over again, as if he were some sort of automatron or something. So I started by asking him if he had called and spoken with Annette Verschuren twice. Very simple question. He refused to answer that. He talked about the appointments process. And I said, well, Ms. Verschuren testified before committee that you had called twice. Is she right, or you? And he talked about the appointments process. I then, after obviously some frustration and interruptions, went on to another area. I asked him, did he appoint André Lise-Matteau in 2016? And he went on about the appointments process and wouldn't say yes or no on somebody. He's on the record as a GIC appointment of appointing. Not he is on the record, it's public record. Then I pointed out the fact that while she was on the board under his watch, that $114 million went to her companies. Was he aware of that? And he talked about the good work of SDTC, didn't talk about whether he's knowledgeable. I said, your assistant deputy minister was in those meetings, Mr. Noseworthy. You must have been informed about that. And he basically said it's a fair and open process. I then went on to ask him about the $750 million that he gave. I should say that before I asked that, I asked in the 25 times that current Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault was lobbying in the year before he was elected, while he was a nominated candidate, that he was lobbying his office on the public record, the lobbyist registry, for Cycle Capital, for money, for Cycle Capital Fund number 4, whether or not he remembered those meetings. And he basically talked about the open appointments process, and he can't be remembered, shouldn't have to remember everything in his life. And then I said, okay, so those meetings were about, as in the registry, meeting with you, of getting money from EDC, and EDC gave $145 million. Do you remember that? And he talked about the activities of SDTC, not about that process to get money. Then I asked about the fact that after all of this corruption that was going on within the fund, his appointment of a conflicted chair, his appointment of board members that were conflicted, like Andre Lise-Mateau, the fact that he had officials in the meeting, every single meeting, where 82% of the time they were voting themselves taxpayer money, why he would take and give $750 million and get cabinet approval to give $750 million more only a month before he left the job to go work at CIBC. $750 million more taxpayer money for this fund when there were clearly management issues. And he again talked about the appointments process. Now, that's just my questions. There were some excellent questions from MP Cooper around the 5 appointments that he made, and whether or not he recalled any of them and whether any of them were conflicted. And he talked about the PCO appointments process. I'm sure some of my colleagues will come up with some other lists, but the member from the bloc brought forward a new revelation that Amber Bettal, the VP at SDTC, for his time there, she worked there for 5 years, and when he was at CIBC, he left, joined CIBC, and guess what? Guess who gets up and starts working at CIBC in the investment banking area where I believe he was, and it is the same person who was working at SDTC. He claims to know nobody and nothing that went on. So time after time after time, when we asked about individual appointments, when we asked about money, when we asked about the reporting of his assistant deputy minister to him, when we asked about whether or not he did a basic thing like a phone call to a prospective chair of the fund, he didn't say, I don't remember. In most cases, he repeated his opening statement line of an open process and that people applied. He totally ignored every single question that opposition parties asked. Unfortunately, we don't know if he ignored questions of the government members because government members didn't ask any. So that's why we have a breach of privilege. There has to be an attempt by the witness to actually answer the question, not repeat a line that's been written for him and ignore the question totally in order to facilitate the further cover-up of these documents and the refusal of the government to turn over the documents to the House. They're clearly hiding things. They're clearly hiding more corruption. And this Liberal minister and the current Liberal minister, but this one started the process, and the current minister, who's been asleep at the switch for 40 months and didn't do anything till it was made public in the media, and still hasn't done anything really because it's still SDTC. It's just got 3 bureaucrats running it now as opposed to Liberal board members. So he didn't answer any questions. He is obstructing the work of this committee in our study of the corruption into SDTC. And we need to send a report to the Speaker for the House to deal with this breach of our privilege.